What's up, y'all? Y'all are listening to Living Corporate's flagship podcast. If you didn't know, Living Corporate helps organizations build employee engagement and market trust through data analytics and data transformation, our e-learning platform, and brand marketing storytelling. We're so excited for you to be here today. The conversation you're about to hear is going to connect the dots between employee experience and go-to-market effectiveness. If you're not ready, get ready. Here we go. Njsane Courtney, welcome to the pod, man. How you doing?
Man, Zachary, I feel like I'm kind of starstruck, man. I'm stoked.
First of all, I don't know why you starstruck. That's crazy. I want to say I'm excited about having you on the pod. I've seen you on these LinkedIn streets for a while. I'm constantly looking for, especially in this moment in time, like constantly looking to talk to HR people leaders. But before we get into all that, man, happy Juneteenth. We're recording this on Juneteenth. What's going on?
Yes, man, we're going to get together and on this awesome day, momentous day, right?
You know, it's interesting. You think about like all the things. It's one I remember when I was a kid, right? So growing up in the South, Juneteenth was a thing, right? Like that's been a thing. And then also like, especially I was born in Georgia and I moved to Texas. And so for those who are in like the Texas, Louisiana, like that's this Southern area, Juneteenth is a really well-known holiday. It's interesting, as you just get older, you don't always appreciate that everyone doesn't have the same context, right? Like everybody didn't grow up necessarily knowing about Juneteenth. It's really interesting and I think exciting to see it turn into a federal holiday. What are things that you've seen organizations do well when it comes to recognizing Juneteenth at work?
I mean, it's one of those things, Zachary, where I'm just happy that it's just being recognized in the general workplace nowadays. It's interesting right now. Actually, my company right now, I'm missing the Juneteenth presentation right now that's here at our organization that's going on. But, as I've talked to different HR folks here, not just in Texas or Louisiana, but just the South in general, it's more mainstream than it was. When I was growing up when I was growing up in North Louisiana, honestly, we never celebrated Juneteenth. We kind of knew about it because there was always something going on at church just to celebrate over the weekend. But growing up, I really didn't see a whole lot about it. And then when I moved to Houston 20 plus years ago, because Juneteenth originated in Galveston, then that's really where I was like, oh, wow, okay, people really recognize this as a holiday. And it just brings me a bit of joy that we were able to celebrate this, to recognize when some of our people, we got the email late, right, in Texas that
right.
About the abolishment of slavery. But you know what? But it's great to be able to kind of celebrate that and recognize that momentous date.
No, absolutely. And like to your point, I mean, it's just the wonders of and the power of communication, right? I think there's some thematic ties there too of like, man, like a lot of us are free, but we just don't know it yet, right? And so there's something to be said about that. I think there's some truths there as it pertains to just navigating the world and your own growth and journey. But yeah, it's a beautiful day, a beautiful time. Thankful that we are out of the shackles of chattel slavery.
Absolutely.
Because sheesh, it's crazy. I was reading anytime. So I honestly, I'm going to stop, but I read a lot of nonfiction, just period books around like just that time. And I remember I read this book written by Dr. Caitlin Rosenthal called Accounting for Slavery. We actually had her on the pod. This was several years ago, but just talking about how so many of the corporate methodologies and management techniques that we have today were built from like those systems. And you just think about like, wow, like think about how far we've come. And yet there's also so many different parallels, but that's a whole nother pod for another day. Njsane, we're here excited to talk to you about your I want to talk about.
Look,
I have.
you
Go
was
ahead.
hey dude, you was getting those war drums going in my head, man. You was about to take us on another journey. I
I
was like,
know.
well,
I know.
I can take off the sports coat and we can get real about it. We
I
can
right. We might still get real with as we keep going, but I was like, man, let me not. I'm trying to work on even now, several years into this podcast thing. I still try to work on pace, but you know, I think the first thing is, we look at your profile, look at your resume. You've been with ABS for almost 12 years, right? Like, I want to understand more why American Bureau of Shipping, and maybe even before why American Bureau of Shipping, like why human resources?
um I ask myself that question almost every day. Why HR? Um, Look, I'd love to sit here and tell you that, you hear the generic statement of, oh, because I love people and things like that. And being a people person does help. But really, it's really about. I've always had a thing for uh, getting the best out of people. That was kind of my start when I was in the military. As an officer, you're trained to get the best out of your people, have the strive for them to be your best selves, so that they can achieve the mission. I was actually in HR in the Army. And so I got out of it, moved to the civilian side, and looking for my next move. And I said, you know what, I'll stick with HR in terms of what I do. Not recognizing, when you're in the military, things are very siloed, things are very compartmentalized in terms of tasks and duties. Then you get into the corporate side of HR, and then recognize, okay, wow, you got compensation, because in the Army there's salary grades, and it's determined by tenure, so there's not a lot of art and science to it. But in the corporate side, it's anything but formalized per se. So, but I realized like, wow, this is a really cool industry. There's a lot of great things. HR has definitely changed over the last 20 plus years in terms of being at the table, being in the room. For a lot of professionals that I've talked to, it's not even about getting to the table anymore. It's like, don't be at too many tables and spread yourself too thin. But I do. At my core, at my fundamental core, I really like building teams, aligning career objectives and goals with business objectives and goals, and showing both organizations and people that business results and providing fulfilling careers for your employees don't have to be mutually exclusive. In fact, if you do them right, one can actually feed the other. So that's kind of what brings me joy, and keeps me fighting that Houston traffic, as you know, fighting that commute every morning. But yeah, that's kind of where my spirit is in terms of that.
I love that. Man, that traffic is a mug. So I hear you.
Stay off of 45.
Stay off of 45, man. Take the back roads if you can. So no, that makes all the sense in the world to me, man. It's awesome. Side note, you talking about you started in the military, dog. I did not realize that you've been in this thing for almost 30 years. You look great. Is it a lot of water?
I exfoliate.
Yeah.
No, man, some good Southern dreams, man. Black don't crack, right?
It don't, but it bend a little bit sometimes. That's why I didn't know.
It might stretch, but it won't crack, man. It won't crack. We've, it's just one of those things, one of those gifts that we have. So, no, but thank you. I appreciate it. Actually, it's funny because I turn 50 next year.
Congratulations.
And so I'm just blessed every day above, like your grandma used to say, every day above ground is a blessed day, right? So
100%, man. No, that's awesome. Yeah, because and I wonder how much of like, again, like your context, right? And like coming in a bit more seasoned because you already had your time in the military, that give you a different like your veteran experience, like you being a veteran, give you a different dimension of like maturity and perspective, right? Than perhaps like somebody who maybe just went straight from high school to college to the workforce. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the military definitely gives you a different perspective on things. Now, like I said, I'm not gonna sit here and perpetrate myself as if I was like, oh, I'm combat hardened type individual. I've never seen combat. I've never been deployed in a conflict type situation. And so, so I always want to distinguish myself from those of my brothers and sisters who are actually seeing their faces in the dirt, rounds going over their heads, every day's life and death, right? I have never been faced with that. But still, as an officer, you're trained to take care of your people and recognize that you can't accomplish your mission without having a people focus. It's impossible to do so. And so that definitely helps. I got commissioned as an officer like really early. And it's so funny. I talked to my wife, who was also a veteran. And I talked to her when I was a second lieutenant. I was not the most mature individual. I could perpetrate myself and say, yes, locked, stock, ready to rock. That was me. Like, I wish I could do that. But then all of a sudden somebody I served with will get on here and says, I served with that dude. Let me tell you about him. But regardless, anybody who wears the uniform, and it doesn't matter which branch, it does transform you. It transforms you to understand that, it doesn't matter, where you come from and your ethnicity. When the rounds start flying, it really comes down to, can you trust a man or woman to your left or right?
Hold on. Yeah. I'm doing a pod.
I can't.
Okay,
that's adorable.
Go downstairs. I love you. I'm doing a podcast. Go with Mimi right there. Go with Mimi. I love you. Bye-bye.
Get on my back.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Oh, that's so great. That is so great.
So I got four. So I got four kids, right? I got two twins. I got a set of twins that are about 2 months old, and then I got a 5-year-old, and I got a 2.5-year-old. And so the 5-year-old, the oldest, I don't know what she got going. She has experiencing some big feelings. We got to talk a little bit later. So I receive what you're saying.
I'm with you because I got a 6-year-old. I got a 6-year-old daughter. Oh. And I'm with you.
The feelings are real, man.
Man, right? I wish somebody would have told me, like, the emotional connectivity that a father has with his daughter. You thought you knew, but you don't know. You don't know. And I don't have a son, but I feel like if I had a son, it'd be different.
Yeah.
Right? That girl, that hashtag girl dad, man, that power is strong. So,
bruh, when I tell you, man, I got it's 3 girls and a boy. The baby, the youngest is the youngest twin. He's a boy. The rest of them are girls. And so, the connection, it's there, man. It's real. You try to, the thing about it is, for me, I'm like, okay, I got to make sure I'm being empathetic and engaging. At the same time, I want to make sure this person is able to navigate the world. So, you don't want to necessarily baby them, but you're not, then I don't know. It's a whole different pie, but it's like, you don't want them to be like, I don't want them to grow up and be like, man, my dad was distant or didn't care. I'd much rather probably err on the side of being overly doting, which is where the whole girl dad hashtag comes from. But anyway,
listen, it's with that. I mean, you are the first man in your daughter's life,
right?
And it's up to us as men to set that example, right? It's up to us to set that example and say, here's how you're supposed to be treated. This is how a man is supposed to treat you. Anything less than that is beneath you. And that you're precious to someone, and you don't have to get your vindication from anybody else. And that's up to us as men to show that example. I'm with you, brother. I take that charge gladly, right?
100%.
Real quick, Zach. Can I turn on? I want to turn on the light in my office. Let me do that real quick because I'm not happy with like Darth Vader on this bad boy. So I'm hoping maybe a little bit more light might help. A little bit.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, there we go. All right, cool.
So getting back to it, right? So, I'm thinking about like this time in this moment, right? I'm thinking about like just the state of work. I'm gonna tell you, it's weird. It's weird, Njsane, like. So I'm seeing posts, and there's a spectrum of posts on LinkedIn. Some posts I see, and it's like, hey, yo, I just got promoted to vice president of such and such, this, that, and the third. Then I see other posts, and it's like, hey, I got laid off last September. Yeah. I've been looking for a job. I've applied everywhere. Nothing's getting me back. I'm trying to support my family. This is me asking for help, right? Other people, hey, I need $200 more to pay my rent this month. These are like small business owners. All of my contacts have dried up. I've lost all my clients. somebody please, like it's, and so you just see this wide breadth of just of things that are happening, right? And there's so many questions and concerns that I think I have in this moment. I'm curious though, as an HR executive, like, what is your analysis of like this point in time as it pertains to the current state of just the job market?
Man, I wish I had the answer for that. It's weird because I was just literally looking at. I got this one brother on LinkedIn, and this dude's he's been looking. He's been out of work for a year. I mean, he's probably on your connections too, and he's been struggling. He sent a comment about like, yeah, now he's really in dire straits, and it's crazy, man, because it's one of those things where at any point in time, any one of us can be in that same spot. Mm-hmm. Right. Within a blink of an eye. It's like, companies, it's brutal out there, man. It's if you fall on the wrong side of a spreadsheet, it can get like that. Because at the end of the day, companies are doing what they got to do to try to stay relevant, stay solvent, have reserves and reserve in case, the fears of the market happen. Right. So that causes them to make a lot of decisions about personnel. HR is overhead. And so we have to validate our existence almost every day. We got to justify every paperclip we spend, and it's always a challenge. And while some people are thriving, some people are going through some really, really tough times. And it just, what I'll say though, Zachary, is the fact that for all those brothers and sisters out there that are out there looking. Keep fighting, keep doing it. The man up, I claim to be a spiritual person, and I'll say this: if the man upstairs didn't bring you this far just to leave you, right?
Right.
And so just we know it's lonely when you're looking for a job, and it's rough when nobody calls you back. But on the other side of that, though, when folks do get a job and they become comfortable and they get, they feel some level of security. I always tell my colleagues, man, be on LinkedIn, man. Get that network, keep that network sharp, stay interview ready. Just, don't sit on your laurels and get comfortable, and things like that, because you get promoted today and then next week something goes sideways and you could be just like everybody else. But you always want to set yourself up so that you are ready for that next challenge, regardless of what it is. If it's a promotion, great. If it's a layoff, you've already done the legwork to put yourself out there, so you're a known commodity, and so that way it becomes just a little bit less challenging if you do find yourself in that position. But we can't ever sleep. We can't get lazy. We can't sleep on it, because at the end of the day, sometimes companies will just do what they got to do to make sure they're moving forward with their objectives, and sometimes that might not involve you. So
I'm curious, like we talk about, I think so much, like earlier we talked about just like, okay, when we both graduated from University of Houston, I talked about the fact I graduated University of Houston in 2011. And I remember, the idea of work at that time was, hey, we're a family, job security, salary, benefits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there was this idea, there was an unspoken or very directly spoken idea of like, hey, you can trust us, like the company telling the employee, you can trust us. Like, this is somewhere we want you to be. Career ladders were a thing, right? And then as time went on, maybe career lattice or career matrix. But the idea was, hey, we're going to bring you in, especially for like undergraduate recruiting. We're going to bring you in at 21, and we want to give you a 5, 7, maybe even 9-year roadmap where we see you going. And if you turn over, you turn over. But if you perform well, we really want to cycle you through a few different things before you eventually leave. We'd love it if you stayed forever, but we realize we can't. And that was just like, you know what I'm saying, in the early 2010s. Mm-hmm. I believe now we're seeing this landscape where those ladders are just not there. Those matrices are not there. Those lattices are not there. It's almost like, hey, we got you here. good luck, and we'll check in with you in like 3 months, right? Like, but again, like you said earlier, you've been in this space for a while. Like, is my assessment off? And like, and if it is or it isn't, like, I just love you to just like hear your perspective on that.
Well, I don't think you're off at all. I think the employee employer relationship has shifted over the last 10 or 15 years, right? I mean, look, when our grandparents worked, right? They worked for whoever they worked for. They were there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? They retired, they got their gold watch, they got their pensions, right? Because there was a kind of a social contract, right? I'm going to give you
Mm-hmm.
the best years of my life, and in exchange for that, you're going to set me up with my pension or my retiree medical benefits, whatever, so that in my golden years, I don't have to worry about that and I can retire with dignity, right? And then you get to the 80s and 90s where companies really killed pensions, and they switched to the 401k. So it's more about upfront versus long term. And then 2008 happened and things fell out. The company, almost every industry was impacted. And then you look at what went down, right? You look at what went down. Folks lost their jobs, folks lost their homes. And so the children of that time watched parents who had given 15, 20, 25 years of their lives to these companies only to have that fall, have the net pulled from underneath them. And again, there's no more pensions. 401ks dried up real quick. Savings got, dried up real quick. And so these kids watched what happened to their parents and how they were rewarded for their loyalty and service. And so now those children are now our Gen Z, right? And Gen Z, I'm going to tell you, right? They're a different brand. They're a different breed. Gen Alpha, they're a different breed. But, before we slam them too hard on having a different mentality about work and their attitude towards work, you got to understand these were the same kids who saw their parents crying at the dinner table because they were about to get evicted from their home because of what happened. And those companies who historically had been there really, really weren't. And I want to say one more thing real quick. And this isn't to slam companies per se. This isn't to slam them. Some companies were pretty brutal. No joke about that. But a lot of companies had to close their doors. Mm-hmm. And I get it from a financial standpoint. Pensions are very expensive. Pensions are insanely expensive to maintain, which is why most companies don't offer them anymore.
And why a lot of companies now are actually, they're reducing them.
Yeah, they're reducing. They're either freezing them altogether, or they're kind of gradually kind of sloping that out and moving people more towards the 401k. And that's fine. Times change. You've got to make good fiscal decisions for the company. I don't slam an organization for that. But we as managers and leaders who are hiring these folks now have to adapt with the times. To expect these kids to stay at a company for 15, 20 years. I tell leaders all the time, that's done. That's done. That's over. However, on the flip side, to some folks who are coming into the workplace who expect to become CEO in 2 months, you also got to put in your time. You also got to put in your work, and nothing's going to be handed to you. I know your mom and dad and your auntie told you that you're special since you were 4 years old, but then you come to the workplace and you're getting feedback that says, "Oh man, I'm not positively perfect in every single way," and they can't handle it. So I think today's worker and today's workplace and the leadership therein, we got some work to do to catch up with each other to figure out how this can work with this new mentality of both the workplace and the work and the worker and this new employee-employer relationship.
So you say you're not here to bash on the companies. Let me tell you something. Live in corporate, we keep it 1,000, and I don't really provide like executive. This is not a cover for executive brands. So, or for like the corporate billionaire class. So I will take it a step further. You ain't saying this. I'm saying it. So that way they come back at you later. Njsane, you'll be like, "Hey, what happened? You was on da-da-da." You'd be like, "Hey, that was not my pod. This was somebody else's pod. I was invited. In fact, he made me come." No, so But
Go for it. Go for it.
no. But here, and like, jokes mostly aside, I think the reality is that, like, I love like the historical context you're providing. I think also it's like where we are as a capitalist society has changed, right? So like we're now like in this late stage capitalist space where we weren't there in the 70s and 80s. Like, it was just a different time, right? To your point about times changing, and like state shareholder expectations changing, right? So like we're not in a place anymore where people are like, hey, we have these 84-month roadmaps and plans, or where, hey, we're really trying to, like, we have these infrastructure type goals and we're trying to like really grow over time. It's like, no, look, executives are cycling much faster, and these boards have different demands. There's different externalized pressures that these corporations have. And so what happens is these longer term goals have been shifted down and changed to like, 6, 12, 18-month moonshots. And so what brands do is they say, okay, here's our new direction and here's what we need to do. Okay, let's go get the talent to achieve against this moonshot. And if you hit your goals during that time, well, then maybe you retain some of that talent. If you don't hit those goals in that time, well, then you let that talent go, because you got to figure out what's next for the next thing. Plus, you see, like earlier what I was talking about, again, I sound so young, but I'm going to say it anyway. Like, my context is 2011. Layoffs, from my perspective as a new employee, that was something that was presented to us as like, hey, this is the last resort. Things are bad. Like, layoffs weren't just happening casually, right? Like, to me, back then when I was 20 something years old, that was presented like something. Now it's like, I mean, Intel's planning layoffs in July and they're doing great, right? There's brands out here making cuts, and like layoffs are not necessarily a function of failure. They're more of just another lever that's pulled to optimize shareholder value. And I think, like, to your point about the future of work and about Gen Z, and shoot, a lot of millennials, the veneer of relationship and connectivity and trust, I think it's gone. It's much more transactional. Okay, I'm coming here to do a thing. Maybe I stay, maybe I don't, but I'm going to get this money as sure as I can, and I'm going to be looking for the next thing, right? Like, because like when I think about, to your point about our parents, my grandparents, like my grandfather worked at John Deere for like 40 years, right? And like, that was a huge deal. Like, he was respected. He retired with a pension. He retired with a pension, and then went on to do his second career doing real estate. But like, he was able to have a single job. He had a nice home, multiple cars, and put all his kids through college. That's not the norm. That's not even possible today. You know what I mean?
No, listen, man. I tend to, people who know me, to try to have a balanced viewpoint about it. I mean, there are great leaders and great organizations doing good things, and there's crappy leaders and crappy organizations that what they do is damn near shameful, right? We've seen it. There's great employees who kick ass, take name, and they bleed for their organization. And then there's employees who spend more time trying to get over and find loopholes in policies versus getting to work and doing what somebody's paying you a salary to do, right? And so, I mean, so there's a lot of room for growth on both sides of the fence. I think. Look, I'll say this. I think when you talked about trust, I mean, trust is definitely eroded, and between the employer and employee and employer. And there's people who have very interesting viewpoints, And I spoke at an event in London a couple of months ago, and I was talking about how trust has been broken. And I made the comment that I personally feel as an individual that modern leadership is broken. And it's because, again, and my new hobby is like the neuroscience behind the worker and the employees and things like that. When you talk about trust and you talk about working for a company and leaders, we as human beings, let's take the employee-employee relationship out of it. Let's just look as human beings and a species.
Mm-hmm.
We are meant to collaborate. We are meant to be social animals. Even those of us who are introverted, that is our natural wiring. Why? Because when we were walking around here in 150 people tribes around the world, we had to bond together for survival and the perpetuation of the species.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're wired, even chemically, we're wired to do that. So then we look at what's going on today and you're like, man, the trust is broken and all this stuff, and everything you said is 100% true. And I think it's because, the reason why we have leaders is not we don't elevate these folks for no freaking reason. That we elevate these people because there's a social contract that says if we elevate you to this level of leadership, that you will protect the tribe. And what are today's tribes? Today's tribes are the workforce, the departments you work for, the companies you work for. And, and where leaders who are elevated, would protect the tribe with their lives, we have some examples where leaders actually sacrifice their employees for their self-gain. And so people look at things and they're like, oh, these CEOs and CFOs and COOs are making millions and millions of dollars. I have no issue with that. I have no issue with that because, it's a lot easier for an administrative assistant to find a new job than there is for a CEO to find another CEO job. So there's high risk with that. And you don't necessarily get to live your own life when you're at a certain level in the organization, because what you do can impact the company. And so versus a frontline employee who can go on social media and say whatever they want to say with no impact. So there's a cause and effect, but I'm going to get back to the original point. And so when you talk about so then how the heck did we get here? At the end of the day, when it comes to leadership, leaders have I personally believe that leaders have an obligation to continue to protect employees and protect them from threats within and without. And unfortunately, a lot of leaders have fallen short with that. There's a lot of conflict avoidance. It's tough for them to have hard conversations. You have departments where the people who work hard get rewarded with more work versus higher positions. The toxic employees, because nobody wants to deal with them, somehow get promoted. And at the end of the day, they're no longer protecting the folks who they are blessed to care for within the organization. The last thing I'll say, because I could talk about this all day, is the fact that this does not mean that leaders are the only ones responsible for the working environment and things like that. Again, we all know employees like this. We all know employees who they're toxic. They ain't gonna be happy no matter what they give them. If they got promoted, today, we know they're gonna be complaining tomorrow about why didn't they get more. And they spend more time analyzing the policy handbook to find loopholes and things like that. And I'm like, if you spend half of that energy on being a productive employee, we wouldn't be having half of these freaking issues. But it does start with leadership, unfortunately, because I personally believe that to whom much is given, much is expected. And leadership set the tone. And we need to get back to that initial covenant of caring for the employees. Doesn't mean we're going to guarantee a job. Doesn't mean that we can promise that all these other things. But there's a right and a wrong way to do everything in terms of leadership. And I think we as leaders, at some points, have definitely failed in that in modern day leadership.
I love the statement, the headline of modern leadership has failed. I think the challenge when I think about leadership today is, and like compared to what's propagated in movies and TV shows, it's the advocacy and the upward management that just does not exist anymore to me, right? So, example, you're my manager. You're a middle manager. You managing me, somebody managing you. Keep it simple. Let's say I'm being mistreated by somebody, by another leader or another employee. You might manage down and say, hey, you're going to advocate for me. Hey, this needs to change. Da 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 da. But then let's say your leadership says, hey, not too much on that. We're creating a bit of a stir. Just let him figure it out on his own. So often, as opposed to you, the middle manager, saying, hey, actually, no, that's wrong. Here's what here's what we need to do, and here's what I believe we need to do and change. Like there's to your point about conflict avoidance, there's an avoidance of conflict with upper management because there's a genuine, which is a human thing of just self-preservation. So it's like, I'm going to push and I'm going to advocate, but only so far. And I think like so often when we talk about, especially I think for like folks on the margins, but this is this is really not this is not exclusive to race at all. I think it's amplified by if you're on the margins. We align being quote unquote strategic with being selectively cowardly, right? So it's like there's this culture of cowardice that we've rebranded as emotional intelligence and savvy. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, of course you shouldn't cuss out your boss, but like there is a way to have a very thoughtful, intentional conversation about what you're seeing. There's a way to manage up. That skill set has really been eroded. And like, so we have like all these layers of people that don't really know how to manage up. Mm-hmm. And so then what happens is you have this exec leadership team that has never been up, that is rarely ever upwardly managed, making a bunch of stupid decisions, and no one's really saying anything. And so like, and like, I agree with who much is given, much is required. And also like, there's another phrase I learned when I was at Accenture is, hey man, the fish rots at the head. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, we got to figure out, like we need to, especially in this moment, because I think we're at this, we're just at this really crucial point. Like when you think about all the things that are coming to us politically, intergenerationally, racially, like we're coming, like this is the most diverse, this is going to be this where we're coming into the most diverse workforce ever, right? We're about to have like 5 generations of work represented. It's going to be the most openly queer workforce, the most open, like the most racially diverse, like they're going to have more and more women in positions of authority and position than we've ever had. Like if there was ever a time to reimagine what leadership looks like for whatever this future of work holds, it's now, because the world of work is just getting so complex, right? But I do like the very simple statement of like modern leadership failing, because it has. I mean, let me ask a follow up, because you sit in an executive position at ABS. Like, what do you believe organizations need to do to create a sense of trust and empowerment so that upward management can happen? I think downward management happens. I believe that happens. I'm not saying that it happens all the time extremely well. Obviously, we need to do better. There's all types of opportunities there. I genuinely think the gap is the upward management part, though. Like, if I'd love to hear your perspective on that. And if you agree with that, what do you think environmentally needs to change in these work in the workplace so that can happen better?
Zachary, so here's the thing. Again, I promise I will try to be balanced, right? You know, there's crappy leaders and there's good leaders, and you know, I see great leadership every day. I'm blessed to see some great examples of leadership every single day. Now, I have, again, talking to folks, going to speaking at different conferences, talking to peers and things like that. Like the truth of the matter is the fact that the face of leadership has definitely changed. It's definitely shifted. It's one of those things where when people start getting promoted, right? You look at how people get promoted in the first place, right? You come in, you get hired to do a job. And Simon Sinek speaks about this all the time, right? You get hired to do a job. You get trained to do this. You train for these skills, these KSRs, in terms of how to do the actual job. Then you get promoted. So what happens when you get promoted? When you get promoted, now you are no longer responsible for doing the work. Now you're responsible for others who are responsible for doing the work that you once did. And unfortunately, companies over the years, in terms of training people in the soft skills that are required to manage people versus processes, that has been severely lacking. It is easy as heck to manage a process. Every company has a policy or a process instruction or a standard operating procedure, SOP, right, that outlines a process. Managing people is difficult. It is hard under the best circumstances. I like managing people. I love managing folks. I'm not what you would consider one of the most technical HR professionals. You threw a spreadsheet in front of me with 1,000 lines of employee data and say, do this and VLOOKUP and, do a pivot. I can do it. Will I enjoy it? No. But I recognize that folks who actually thrive and like managing people, that does not happen as much. But companies, I think in general, across all industries, we could always spend more time training managers on soft skills to be able to deal with team conflict, be able to deal with performance issues in a timely manner so it doesn't become toxic and become combative. And then, unfortunately, a lot of companies pride themselves on technical expertise. So then these middle line, these people who've been promoted get promoted again into higher levels, still hadn't been trained on terms of how to deal with people, deal with mediation, deal with conflict avoidance, and now they become executives. And then, unfortunately, the people coming up see who's getting promoted. And in companies, regardless of whether or not they want to admit it or not, when you promote somebody, you are telling your workforce what good looks like. Okay,
Facts.
There could be a million reasons behind the scenes that why this person got promoted. And I'm going to also say this: being in the workforce and being an executive, perspective is everything. And there's a lot of things in terms of running a company that the average employee does not see. It's like when you were a kid and your parents made these rules. And when you were 12, 13 years old, you starting to be a man. You got hair growing where you used to have hair. You start, as your grandma used to say, you're smelling yourself a little bit. And your parents would say, make these rules and these policies and these things and these demands in the house. And you go to the room, slam the door. Oh, I wish he was dead. and not really understanding that, where they were coming from. Because
Right.
when we were growing up, what did our parents tell us when we said why? Because I said so. Right. Because I said so. And unfortunately, a lot of leaders have that same mentality. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that the regular frontline employee doesn't see. And what I have learned in human resources in working with people is that in the absence of facts and data, employees will go to the most negative consequence because that's easier to believe at the end of the day. But what leaders have to do is we have to step up. We have to step up. We have to grab that bull by the horns, have those uncomfortable conversations, even if they're not good. And the other thing I will say is, in my experience, Zachary, most managers do not relish the idea of doing layoffs and reductions. Most don't. There's very rarely in my 20, 30 years of being in HR have I seen someone who is just like what you would consider like actually evil incarnate, right? I've very rarely seen that.
It's rare. It's
rare. Unfortunately, when somebody's getting let go and they're about to lose their livelihoods, there is nothing the most savvy leader can say to make that okay. At the end of the day, there's nothing I can tell you. I can sit here and show you the financials. I can show how we're not meeting our margins. I can show you the trend analysis that says if we keep going like this, we're going to do mass layoffs versus localized layoffs. I can show you all that. At the end of the day, daddy got to go home and tell mama that we ain't going on vacation this week. And we may not know where our mortgage payment is coming from. So all that doesn't really matter. But what can we do as leaders? We can take the time to train ourselves to remember to treat our people like people, recognizing that there's a person at the other end of this transaction if there is a layoff. Treat our people humanely. And what I've also noticed, the last thing I'll say in terms of this, what I've also seen is that if leaders, and I've seen people that could be considered assholes, but they were very blunt and upfront. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be nice to get legitimacy with your staff. You just got to be a straight shooter and say it like it is. And if you've built that relationship over time and you recognize that, yeah, he or she is not the nicest person in the world, but I can take what they say to the bank. If they have to have that conversation with you, will you like it? No. But at the end of the day, though, you will actually, you'll be able to accept it better because they built a level of trust with you, which goes back to what you said earlier about the trust dynamic between management and leadership. And we have to value that trust. We need to build trust with our employees. And that doesn't happen by one big policy. It sure as hell doesn't happen by a pizza party. It happens by every day showing up, being consistent about the application of your processes and rules, being honest about dealing about conflict, and dealing with situations as they happen. And if you find yourself sitting across the table from somebody having a difficult conversation, will they like it? No. But at least they won't be mistrusting the message behind the message.
Man, several mic drops in there. 100% agreed, right? I think, and to your point, like, man, I'm not tripping about you trying to hold my hand and treat me like I'm a kid, talking to me like I'm 4. I'd much rather a blunt, honest message than like a dishonest, nice one, right? Mm-hmm. And like that is where relationship and trust comes into play. Man, look, Mr. Courtney, it's been a phenomenal time.
I appreciate it, man. It's been great. We need to do part 2 on this. I think that there's more we need to talk about.
There's plenty more we can talk about. I mean, you didn't invite me, and I'm not going to invite myself, but you do have a podcast, right? So I don't know.
Hey, man, look, at this point, after all the conversations we've had behind the scenes, we pretty much family at this point, right? So right. You're my brother from another mother. So
let's coordinate.
As a matter of fact, you know what? We so cool. When you come over, you don't even have to ask to go in the refrigerator. You know where it's at.
I just open it up. I just reach
you
in
know,
and grab
you know where those Ozark water's at. You know where that's at. But no, yeah, I do have a podcast. It's called My Friend in HR. It's all about career fulfillment, have an honest talk about how do you have, fulfilling careers, whether you're an executive, mid-level manager, or frontline employee. And the hook that we have, my slogan on that podcast is, remember that your job is meant to support your life. Your life is not meant to support your job. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what we said at the very beginning, trying to show folks that if you want to have a fulfilling career, if you want to have career fulfillment, you can do it. But it starts with a conscious choice that, like, I'm going to have a fulfilling career. I'm not going to wait for somebody to hand it to me. I'm not going to sit back and wait for my manager to hand me a promotion. I'm going to go get mine because I know I'm that talented. I know I'm that blessed. And at the end of the day, I know I'm destined for great things, and show people, regardless of where they are, they can go out and get it regardless of what obstacles folks put in your way.
I love it, man. Look, it's been Njsane Courtney, HR executive, HR consigliere. You know what I'm saying?
I love it. You're a Godfather fan. I love it. That's great.
You know what I'm saying? Veteran, speaker, consultant, mentor. Appreciate you, man. Check out links in the show notes to learn all more about this brother here. We'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.
All right. Stay up.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.